Thank you for joining. I'm just going to make myself a little bit bigger on the opening slide. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. As you can see, I'm testing out my green screen here. It seems to be working a little bit better than the team stuff before. As many of you are aware, my name's Samuel Spencer, and I'm Chief Executive Officer of Aristotle Metadata. And we're here today to talk through, I guess, the big challenge of data inventories. Today's really around not about tools. It's really around methods. It's really about process that achieves the needs of their organization. What we're going to do is we'll step through the agenda in a second, and we're going to run through a bunch of demos and a bunch of previews of things that we're going to be running through. But to get started, now that I think we've got quite a lot of attendees joining, I kind of want to just talk about. Just give me one quick second. Oh, good Lord. Always great when this happens. We're just going to move straight along with that stuff happening there. There we go. So this is the agenda for today of what we're really going to be looking at, and I'm just going to move my head out of the way and just kind of talk through what we're going to be looking at. So the number one thing we want to be looking at is, why is this data inventory everybody's talking about so important? Like, why is this such a hot topic? We're going to look at a little bit around how we can use internal tools, like tools we've already got available to us to start documenting that information to achieve those outcomes that we're seeking to get. And then we're going to look at a little bit at Aristotle. We're going to look a little bit at Aristotle as how it really takes us to the next level. So the majority of this presentation is really focused on how we can build that best practice, how we can build good practice within our organization. As an enabler of that as we start to scale that challenge out. There's really two audiences today. I hope today you're going to fall into one of two different areas. You're either somebody who's really interested in data because you think it's important and you're looking for those first steps. You're looking to understand how you can help organizations, or how you can help people in your organization understand your data. And then the second audience that we're going to be talking towards is really focused on people who are responsible organization, and you want to understand how you can engage with people who aren't, but you want them to be taking steps on that journey. So we're really talking about people who are trying to manage data or trying to help others manage their data and are really confused about what options are available for that. But before we kind of jump in, I just want to start with this lovely slide. We've workshopped this quite a lot. I think it's a really powerful story. We talk about data as this thing that we love to use. We love to see it in action. But it's really like fireworks. Data is this big, beautiful, impacting kind of thing that we own in our. But as we've seen, it's very volatile and it's very dangerous. Like, it can be misused, it can be lost, it can be escapes the organization and can be used in malicious ways. So we need to treat data just like we treat fireworks. We need to know why it's being used. We need to know how to treat it. We need to know, how should we be using this data so that when we start to use that volatile asset, we can do something with it. So if we know that data is so powerful, again, like, you look at this image, it looks so beautiful, but what we don't see is we don't see weeks of effort that lead up to an explosive, kind of event like this. How do we treat our data safely? And we do that by treating it like an asset, by managing it, by understanding where it is. If we know where our data is, not what's in it, but if we know where it is, we can do very interesting things with it. And that's what a data inventory is. A data inventory is a way for us to understand what data we hold in our organization. Like, it's a way for us to go, where is data, and who do I talk to about accessing it? Moving on. We had a couple of tech issues getting into this one. The other thing that I want to talk, I'm going to move my head again, probably for the second last time today, is how we do that, right? So we've just told you there's this story that you're all of a sudden responsible for this very powerful asset. It's really impactful. You can do amazing stuff with it. And we need to be managing it well. We need to be doing a good job of knowing where our data is. Oh, can we not see my head? Oh. Oh, well, if you're not seeing my head, that's okay. Let's see if we can try that again. If we need to be, what we need to be doing is we need to be managing our data well. We need to be doing the right things at the right time. And that's a really daunting task. I think as anybody can understand, when you get given a new job, you get given a new role, you're in a position where you want to understand what your responsibilities are. And I think a part of that comes down to what we're talking through here is the MAST and the IDEAL methodology. MAST and IDEAL are things that we've been workshopping with a lot of our clients to help them understand how to develop processes. What are the steps that we need to do, in what order, and in what stages to achieve the outcomes we're trying to achieve? How do we build a whole of government or a whole of corporate data catalog that allows us to understand everything about how our data is being used? It's not an easy task. So what we've done is we've built MAST and IDEAL as two components of building that framework. MAST and the MAST manifesto on the left are really around helping organizations understand why this is important. Now, I think if you're somebody who has come along to a lunch and learn session with Aristotle metadata, I think metadata is something that's going to be important to you. I think I don't need to convince you of why metadata is important and why we need to be doing this well. I want to focus on the bit on the right, which is, that ideal wheel. How do we build that process? How do we go from we don't know what our assets are to we have a world-leading data catalog that helps us understand everything about who's using our data, where it's being used, how it's being used, and who I can share it with? How do we get to that journey? And how do we make sure that we're continuing to move through that cycle? Because it's not a once-off process. It really is about building an operational process for understanding what do we do on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly cycle to make sure our data is the best quality we can get it. So that's why today we're only going to focus on one part. Like in the emails that we sent out, we really did say that this is the first of we're going to be running. This session's really only focusing on that inventory challenge. On that first barrier of saying, what data does my organization hold? We're not going to go down the path of, what is within that data. We're not going to ask, when did I publish it, or how did I get it out of the building, or how do I make sure that every consistent terms? The first step really is building an inventory, building an understanding of what's there. And it does kind of align with, and we're going to talk a lot about the ONDC's core attributes, because the Australian Government Office of the National Data Commissioner has been doing a lot of communications around making sure that everybody understands what their requirements are. We're going to be coming into it with a bit of an ONDC lens, but we want to be talking about it in broader context and saying, how can anybody set up a data inventory so that we can start that journey, so that we can do more? The idea is by the end of this session, you're going to understand exactly what you can do right now, what you need to do, and also when you need to stop. There's a bunch of things that I'm going to tell you not to do right now, because we've seen them be classic pitfalls in trying to achieve data governance. So this is our expertise saying, because you're not going to be able to, we're not going to get the outcomes we want. So the outcome we want today is, how do we take tangible next steps to building that data inventory? So to look at that, we're going to look at a couple of tools, and we're going to start with the classic one, the one that everybody knows, and I'm going to keep bouncing my head around. I don't know if everybody can see my head. If you can see my head, throw a thumbs up. And if you want me to take my head away, just maybe drop a thumbs down and we'll fix that problem. Producer saying there's no head, so that's good. You guys, you're not missing out. So what we can see here is we've got this challenge of, like, the really classic thing that everybody goes to is documenting assets using Excel. We're going to do a really this one because I think it's important to understand what we can do in Aristotle and what we can do with Excel. But I think everybody's really familiar with it. Anybody tried building a data inventory using Excel? Like, maybe give a thumbs up if you tried building a data inventory for your team, your organization using Excel. Like, thumbs up. Has anybody given that a shot? Nope. Yeah. We've got a couple of thumbs up. Has anybody, like, maybe give a thumbs down if you've struggled with that, if you've had challenges with that? Because I think the things that we're seeing here, the things that we've seen traditionally are, like, Excel's really great for data savvy users. You know, if you know how to use a VLOOKUP, if you know how to use freeze panes, you're in your element. You know what you're doing. It's also really good when you've got a lot of complex information, or you've got a lot of records that you want to be managing. You've got, you know, 10 or 15 data assets that you want to quickly churn through. You've got all the information available. The areas where we start to struggle, and I'll show you this in a second, is the areas where we start to struggle are when our records are long or complex. When we want to put, like, does everybody know how to put a line break in Excel? Because I always forget how to do that. You know, you want to type half a paragraph in there, and you meet those barriers. You've got wrapping of text, and you've got, you know, like, it starts to become a bit of a challenge. The other challenge is when you need to engage lots of users. When you've got 15 or 50 or 150 different business areas and you're trying to get them to engage with the process, you're either sending out, you know, 150 versions of the spreadsheet, or you're hoping everybody's working in the same environment. And it becomes a bit of a challenge. It becomes a challenge because people don't know which record should I be maintaining? Where do I stop? Where do I start? How much do I fill in? You know, it becomes a challenge. But I want to talk through this one because I think it is really important when you've got this challenge, specifically when you've got a bulk set of records to upload, when you've got all that information. And I'm going to quickly jump a little bit into Aristotle because I think there was some feedback and some questions around this one. So we've actually got a lot of support building your Excel data inventory. We can actually support that directly through the platform itself. So you should all be able to see my screen. And one thing that we've built direct is a number of Excel-based upload formats to support that exact challenge. So you'll see here under our create, we've got this bulk import process. So if you've already started that journey of your Excel spreadsheet, and you're getting to that point of scalability of having to have multiple different users trying to maintain it over time, we've got really nice support to just bring that directly in. We've got a really good template that's sitting there that allows us to just grab an Excel spreadsheet, and we can, whoops, click the wrong button, download our template, and we can actually just open that up and start our data inventory straight away. So one thing that you will notice though is again, I'm going to highlight that challenge because I think it's really important, is Excel naturally lends itself to multiple records. Like you see this and you go, I've got to fill in 24 different data assets, and it goes off the side of the page. So it's going all the way off to column M, and you know, it becomes a challenge. I'm not going to lie, I've had it. Anxiety, choice paralysis. Do I do all the names first? Do I do one complete record and go left to right? Like, it's a bit of a challenge, but it's a really good way to get started. If we've got that information, we can save these data assets, we can drag them into Aristotle. It's going to consume all that for us, and it's going to build a bunch of nice records that we'll see really soon. But yes, I want to view those later. Got a whole bunch of stuff in my sandbox. There's a to-do list, 10-page. But the thing that I want to talk most about is I'm going to bring back our PowerPoint and go, we've actually been experimenting with something really interesting. I've nerded out about this for a couple of weeks. So this was my Christmas fun research and development activity. I just spent a couple of weeks hacking something together, and I think it's really interesting. And I'd really like to get some feedback on this one because I think it's really powerful. So we got some feedback. We've been doing lots of workshops recently with people in the position of trying to engage, lots of users across an organization, trying to understand what data is available, what data do we have, so we can populate this inventory. The feedback that we got was all around Excel spreadsheet. It's very challenging for people to know where to begin. It's very large, and again, there was those issues of complexity of choice, like how do I even get started? What we've done is we've actually built a template, and I'm going to bring it up right now because I'm really and we've called it our simple ONDC dataset template. Sharing this with everybody who's registered. We're going to be putting this online. It's not an official template, but it's one that we've been building some tooling around internally, and it's designed for novice users who aren't familiar with Excel. this is, as we kind of said in the slides, and I'm just going to move this a little bit out of the way for a second, is it's really good for people who, only have one business owner of data. Like, we want to be able to work with them in tools that they understand context and as much content around their data as possible. And the core 26 attributes really focus on not the data, but all of that information, all of that rich metadata around it. Who's using it? Where's it come from? So what we've done is we've developed this word template that we think is really powerful. What it does is it kind of combines the best of both worlds. Sorry, Ramantha. Can you hear me a bit better now? So as you can see here, we've taken this word template and we've started with just the core attributes. So everything from the ONDC 26, we've grabbed it into a table and we've just dropped it into a word template. All of those fields are there, and we've also dropped in a little bit of information right at the bottom. So all of our purpose. So again, this is what we're talking about when we talk about metadata. It's where's it from, how's it being used, what's the license of it, all that information that helps us understand when and how I can use that data. We've also added a little bit to the bottom around that data lineage work as well. Where has this data come from? Like what data am I using? And we'll talk about why we've selected that focus there of going, what did I use to generate my data? But that's not the key thing, right? This is just a word template. And I think a lot of people can understand the challenges of getting really good structured information out. The one thing that we've done is we've actually made this template so that the editing of it is completely restricted except for these fields. So we've made a really nice form template that allows us to capture that information. And if you're not an Aristotle user already, or if you're working with people who are still starting their journey, this is going to be a really great tool because you don't need any complex tooling to start your data inventory challenge, to start documenting that data. What this template's designed to do, and I'm going to go all the way back at the top, is it's designed to give a bunch of really tailored fields to help users do exactly what they need to do. So where we've got a title, I can put in the title of my data asset. I can't change the text. I can't add any new lines. If you can hear me clicking, I can't add any new lines to make it extra complex. But if I wanted to add in a description, that's where I can add longer information. So I'm going to add longer information here. And I can add my new lines and go, this is great. And I can also start putting in bullet points. So I can start to build out that really descriptive information about what I'm trying to capture. The next thing that we've done is we've taken everything from the ONDC 26. So that's including our Australian focused like codes and controlled vocabularies, and dropped them in as well. So if we wanted to talk about how this was an official data set and the access is conditional, we can drop all of that information in as well. So that the word template here is really driving us towards a focus of, making sure that users are putting in exactly what's necessary to meet that requirement. So there's a lot of controls and a lot of tailoring and help through the tool to help users capture all that information. The other thing that I found was really, really interesting was the ability for us to even go down and start adding in date fields. So it's really striving to drive them towards specific responses necessary to complete that, legislative driven need to develop a data inventory. So this template is a really nice word template. And the other thing that we'll show, well, we won't show the legalese at the bottom, but we're actually releasing it as Creative Commons. So it's a really nice Creative Commons template that we're sharing with everybody in the data community to start documenting that information. So the ability for us to pull all that information together is really powerful. And because it's all within a template, users can open it and create new data asset records really, really quickly. The challenge here is probably going to be actually, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause, I'm going to take a breath, and I'm going to show you one that we completed earlier today. So this was one that we took from data.gov.au, and this was one that was completed by like somebody in our executive team to really trial it, to see how easy to use this is. And I think something that's really interesting is we've taken this data asset and we've documented everything about it. And I think it took about 10 to 15 minutes to pull together. And this is something without a strong data background. They're really powerful with finance, but they haven't got this traditional metadata background that a lot of people have. They know that they want to be documenting this information better, and they were able to pull this together, pull all of our 26, document all of our information, and do it in a way that is tailored to meet the requirements of that ONDC Data Act in about 25 minutes. You know, there's no necessary, like there was no mess, there was no fuss. Everything was captured in a really smooth, consistent way. And that consistency means that every asset that comes back that's documented using this template, everything's going to be consistent. We're going to see a lot of consistency across our data inventory. So we're getting the same names, the same assets, the same keywords. I'm not going to delve into how we set all of that up. I think, again, there's probably if you're interested, we can set up a second session. I'd be love to talk to people about how we can set up a tailored template directly for you that meets your needs specifically. But the one that we've done for the ONDC is basically designed to capture all those fields in a way that's, you know, really consistent and really easy to use. The other thing that we've done that I think is really powerful as well is all the way at the bottom of the page, we talked about this data source detail. So the ability for us to document where this data was generated from. So we've taken that information about how this data asset was created, and we've started to talk about what data, you know, is used in the generation of this one. The other great thing in the template itself is it allows us to add more and more in. So it's a really interactive form that allows us to document as many of those additional assets as necessary. By documenting that data lineage here, by talking about how my data was made, it basically creates a to-do list for the rest of the organization. I know that if my data is coming from these 4 data assets, and I tell you a little bit about, you know, where that data has come from, and I tell you a little bit about, you know, where I get that from and who I talk to get it, it gives our data governance teams a really powerful to-do list to say, well, here's 3 more assets that I'm going to go get. So once we send this out, we're going to have a really clear, open, available template for us to use in a really structured way to share across our organizations. It's going to allow us to document all of that ONDC information. It's going to be really clear for users to use. And we've got a lot of help text. So down the bottom of the page, there's a lot of help and a lot of information. And the other thing to kind of call out as well is we've tailored this to that complex corporate government environment where we can't use macros. So there's no macros in this, there's no custom code, there's no firewalls that are going to be a problem, there's no procurement, there are no challenges now to us starting this journey. This becomes a template that we can share with the rest of the organization so that we can start documenting more and more data assets. So we can also, so we can start inventorying more and more data assets. But that's only part of the challenge. So what we've talked through is we've talked through the ability for us to get all of these together. But in an ideal state, if we start using these templates, and we're going to share these out to everybody who's registered, and we'll be putting a link in the YouTube channel when we release this recording as well, is what we'll be doing is we'll be sharing links out, and you're going to get 20, 30, 50 assets. You're going to get duplicates of assets. You're going to get, you know, you're going to start having a very different challenge. The challenge of I've got no information about my data, and I've got information about my data that's not structured and isn't in a central location. They're 2 different problems. And that's where we start pivoting into Aristotle. That's where we start to say, well, how can we leverage this information that we've collected and put it into a structured format? Well, the good news is, and I'm going to scroll all the way back up the top so we can see the name, is because of how we've set this template up, all these fields can be pulled out and extracted into an Aristotle really easily. So I'm going to jump back to my slides and just give you a little bit of a preview of this one, just to give you some idea about how we did it. So we think that this word format offers for those early stage users a really good trade-off between, you know, I want to start now and I need it to be structured. It allows us to capture that business knowledge, but also does it in a way that's going to help us with our data governance later on. We've developed a couple of templates. So we've developed a really simple inventory template for the ONDC and for the ISO 11179 standard that we develop around. And we've made sure that everything in that template can be extracted automatically. So this template, if we use it correctly, if we do it well, it basically can come straight into an Aristotle data catalog, straight into an Aristotle metadata registry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly jump across and show you what that looks like. So got to find my link. These are all of my templates that we've set up. Just minimize that one. Here we go. Ta-da. There we go. So this is what it looks like. So this is one we did earlier today. I was going to do it live, but I was given some really good indications. Maybe we had a few technical gremlins today. So we've actually pulled this in. We've transformed everything in. We've got all of our landing page information. We've got our contact points. We've even started getting that provenance information. So where is our data coming from? We've got all of our custom fields. So everything from that data, that template has been brought straight in, and it tells us exactly what we need to know about this asset about that asset in this registry. So we've got everything there. The other powerful thing is this becomes a way for us to start leveraging the data cataloging tools in Aristotle to start finding those. So what I can do is I can start filtering on things and see, what happened most recently. So you can see here now all of a sudden I've got this information dropped into my catalog. Because we've got everything in a nice structured format in those templates, what we can do is we can basically, automatically extract that information and start bootstrapping that data catalog development and start bringing that information in. The other thing that we can do is we can actually maintain it as well. So this is probably, I'm going to do a pause point after this because I think with some of those technical hiccups, we went a little over time. I'm going to stay on and run through the rest of it, but I want to close for a second or pause for a second here. The other thing that we can do through this as well is it allows us to maintain this information. So maintenance is really the key, is understanding how we're going to maintain this data over time, not just how we're going to put it into a place. The Aristotle registry, we've set this one up so that when we open this information, when we start editing these records, and because I know that I have permission to edit this record, I know that nobody else is going to change it underneath me. This is my record, so I have permissions to control it. I can actually update all of those references. I can update all of that licensing information that's been brought across. And then also I can update all of my ONDC information as well. So everything around my security classification, my legal authority, my disposal information, like what am I supposed to do with this data, all can be edited and maintained through the platform, could also be created through the platform. So it becomes a really collaborative way for us to start developing those data inventories out. So what we've seen there is we've seen how we can pull that structured information into a data catalog and start using it to understand what data is available across my organization. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump back to my slides because I think I don't want to keep everybody too long, and I want to quickly run through one or two final key points. The first one is really around that data lineage. It's really important to not focus on where our data is going to, because it's a very open question. How your data is going to be used is actually a hard thing for you to answer. But what you can answer is where your data has come from. The more you document about your data now, like the more you document about where it's come from, it again provides that additional context around how your data should be interpreted, and it starts to build a to-do list for the rest of the organization. You don't need to know everything about those data assets that you use, but letting people know where your data's come from becomes really powerful. We've already looked at importing, so we're going to skip over these. We'll just briefly pause and say, like, we've been able to use that Aristotle data catalog functionality to try and find and access some of that information. And the editing, there we go. And the last thing that I wanted to kind of cover in today's session is really those pitfalls, because this is the first of 5. I don't want anybody to think that this is everything that we need to do around data inventory and data management. This is the first stage in a data governance journey. We shouldn't be worrying at this stage about that challenge of different names. We know that different parts of the organization will use different names for the same assets. It is going to be a bit of a pain point, but it's a pain point we want to tackle later on. We want to encourage users to start documenting what they have and what they know, because if we put roadblocks in front of people and say, look for other names first, it introduces a challenge. What we need is we need to make sure the tooling we have later on in our audit and harmonize stage allows us to bring those similar assets together and make sure we update links across our registry and links across our catalog. The second thing I want to talk through is understanding why this is a really great stage to look at now. Like, Word isn't the end state solution. It's not going to be the solution for how we manage our data inventory next year or in 5 years' time. But what we need to do is figure out a tangible first step to help our organization on that journey. Down the track, we want to look at data catalogs. We want to understand how we can bring those in. But the ability to start doing that, to the ability to start documenting that data becomes really important, and it generates need and that leadership later on for bringing additional tooling like the Aristotle registry in. In the next webinar, we're going to look at data documentation. So we're going to look at going down and starting to document individual components of our data assets. But again, we only want to do that for our highest value ones, and we want to do that in a structured way. At our inventory stage, we really just want to start developing that inventory process. And the last thing that I want you to know is you don't need to be an expert. Again, we had somebody do this today as an exercise, seeing this template for the first time, and they were able to complete an ONDC record in 20 minutes. Really quick, really easy stuff. The template is designed to get us started now. Any additional information you can pull together about your data is going to be valuable. It's going to help people understand what your data means and how they should be interpreting it. As a closing stage, I just want to bring this back up again and say this is the first part of a life cycle. It's part of building that governance practice within your organization. We don't need to start doing everything now, but we want to do it in a structured way, and we want to do it in a way that we communicate when we're going to bring certain things in. We know that in the inventory stage, we don't need to have a perfect single set of lists because we're going to do an audit and harmonization phase later on. We don't need to have a singular set of data elements because we're going to build that as part of our documentation and our endorsement phases. We don't need a data catalog today. We don't even need a data catalog tomorrow. What we want to do is start building that best practice now using the tools we've got in our organization to start building towards a journey of where we do need a data catalog. When we do have this problem of, we've got 50 well-documented assets, how do we find them and how do we manage them then? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause here. I think this is the end of our talk, and I think I've gone 3 minutes over. So for those of you who've stayed on, really appreciate it. As I said, starting from tomorrow, we'll be sending out these templates to people who are really interested. We're going to be working with existing clients who need to bring those data inventories in. So we've got some internal processes that will support that. And we're going to be sharing some information on our Aristotle community on community.aristotlemetadata.com with information around how to use those templates as well, because we think they're going to be really powerful, again, just to get people moving on that inventory and building that data governance and data documentation. So what I want to do is I'm going to pause here and say thank you very much for listening. And I guess I'm going to open it up for questions and comments. And also, if you think that those templates are going to be useful, we worked really hard on them. So I'd love to see, if you think it's going to be useful, throw a thumbs up again. It's always good to see that engagement because, again, this can be a very one-way conversation. But I'll pause it for questions. I think because we had some tech issues, we've kind of adjusted to a regular Teams meeting. So if you're comfortable, we'll stop the recording now. And if you want to ask questions, just kind of open your mic and say hello to the rest of your community as well. So I don't know, are there any questions from everybody or from anybody?